Good morning, everybody. Today is May 4th, Monday, including today, we officially have 19 school days left. It's about 6 o'clock and haven't taken a shower yet, but I wanted to get this out to you guys. Um, I also have a baby bird in my backyard. I'm not a fan of wild animals, but it's kind of funny because the mom, I'm thinking it's the mama bird, has stalked Sadie yesterday. Every time Sadie was outside, front yard, backyard, this big old black crow would be like, caw, caw. So I made my brother come over last night and look at the bird in the corner, and it just sitting in the back with its mouth wide open, like, help me, help me. So my brother is supposed to come pick it up and take it to the vet. I am going to go dig for a worm as soon as I'm done with this and try to feed it to the bird without touching the bird. But I don't want responsibility of this bird dying on my hands. All right. If you notice, I have a lot of post-it notes because as I read last night, there was a lot of things that I wasn't sure about. Um, so um, here we go. Chapter 10, it's a long one. So again, break it up into morning session, PM session. All right, this one's called the patchwork. Patchwork is when you put things together like different chunks of things. And in this case, they're talking about the clothes patchwork. Sailor, OR, suffix OR. So means someone who. So a sailor is someone who sails. You got it. And a lot of the verbiage, the language was what I was stuck on. Like, what does that even mean? So I'm just going to kind of cruise through it. Remember, we're not sailors, or at least I'm not. Um, but the language might be a little bit different, but you'll understand the idea. Darkness, my uncle liked to tell me, is good for business. I thought at first that this was just an excuse for his miseryness. I thought that he was simply unwilling to burn sufficient candles and lamp oil to keep his tavern well lit. Tavern is a bar. But I soon saw for myself that it was true, meaning that he keeps his tavern dark. Um, and the kid thought it was because he wanted to save money, like electricity and things like that. Like my dad at the restaurant, he likes to keep the air conditioner off because it's very expensive. So unless somebody complains about it or says, "Hey, it's kind of hot in here," or, "Hey, can you turn the air conditioner on?" Then he won't. So saving money. In this case, the uncle tells his nephew, "Yeah, it's nice to keep the darkness because it brings in business." "See, this is a sailor's inn," he told me, "and a man who has been at sea has likely as not gathered some secrets to him on his voyage," meaning they come in with secrets. "And he may want those secrets to remain in darkness. So let them as wants to be as seen go sit by the fire everywhere else. Well, there should be light enough that if any man should kill another, then he can be sure of his identity, but no more than that." So, and my eye is killing me. I had to put my contacts in and my allergies. So this eye right here is funky right now. So what he's saying is there should be just enough light that if you kill somebody, you should be able to see who it is to identify him, but that's it. No more light than that. My uncle, like my late father means your dad had died, had been a seafaring man himself in his day, and so had a good knowledge of the ways of sailors. And indeed, his judgment proved sound. In the port town we had made our home, the Seven Stars is the name of the place, was by far the most popular hostelry with not fearing, seafaring, which means they go to sea. And the simple bill of fare of rum, ale, stew, and darkness. and a strong possibility of a decent brawl, like a decent fight, proved both popular and profitable. So, how the uncle was running this little bar in this town was making money because it was so popular. My uncle having married my mother. So, my uncle is married to my mom. My uncle is my dad's brother. So, having my dad die, now my uncle, who's his brother, has now married my mom. Okay. So, not only is the uncle own the bar, but it's now his stepdad. My uncle married my mom shortly after my father's death, regarded me as his rightful property, and so he set me to work in the inn. I worked a little in the kitchen, though this was principally my uncle's domain, having himself been a ship's cook in his sailing days. Cook? My dad used to call it kitchen patrol, KP, who has kitchen patrol. So his uncle was the cook on a ship, and now that's his main job at the bar. But mostly I served at tables and seldom was trade so quiet that I was not worn ragged by the end of the night. Occasionally, though, a brief respite from my labors might be gained when a lone sailor, in want of an audience for some unlikely tale, bade me join him at his table, like, come, sit, sit, sit. I suppose I was young, that such men thought me more likely to be gullible, and so to believe even their most incredible yarns. Yarns is another word for stories. And my situation as an employee of the house forced me to maintain a polite silence, even when I did not. But from time to time, there would be a worthwhile story, well told, that rewarded my attention. Occasionally, there may even have been a grain of truth in some of them. One November evening, in my 13th year, so I was 13, it seemed as if such a tale had come my way. A ship of His Majesty's Navy had not long come into dock, and the Seven Stars was riotously busy that night. Our customers shifting around the place, restlessly seeking the best and rowdiest company. But the fellow who beckoned me to his table alone among them seemed content to remain seated in one place. Despite his having chosen the darkest corner of the tavern, I could discern at once that he was not himself a Navy man, for he wore not a uniform, but instead a great and raggedy patchwork coat, like the title. It was an extraordinary thing, seemingly pieced together from the remnants of a dozen other garments, all of different sizes, colors, and fabrics. The resulting garment was a lumpy, shapeless thing, and yet I could just discern held together with the finest and most exquisitely skillful stitching. His collar was turned up, and wide brim of his ancient leather hat was tilted down toward me. So now that his beckoning hand had returned beneath the table, the darkness and his clothing combined to hide from me every last inch of his person, save for his dimly visible, unblinking eyes. That was a whole lot of detail. I see that the time was still going, so I hope you didn't see me just get a drink of coffee, blow my nose, and put chapstick on. It's a rough Monday morning. All right. I know where we are. I thought it likely that he would be a rough fellow, but in fact, when he spoke, I found his voice to be soft and refined. I wonder, young sir, if you might bring me a plate of stew and a tankard of ale, like a big cup of beer. Here we are again in another bar. Of course, sir, I am indebted to you. I duly served the strange gentleman his stew and ale, and made to leave him, but he bade me stay. Please, lad, he said, would you grant a sailor a few moments' conversation? I guess I should have like a deeper, rougher voice, because that's what I imagine sailors being like. I have been long at sea, and I would be grateful for a little company. I joined him gladly, for, as I have said, I was weary already from the evening's work. My uncle would no doubt punish me if he saw me, but as usual, he was in the kitchen rather than at the bar. So I reasoned I would be safe. So if his uncle came out of the kitchen and saw him sitting, he would be in big trouble. Are none of you crew here for company, sir? At this moment he had smiled a little, for I briefly caught sight of a faint glimmer of dim candlelight on dull teeth in the shadows beneath his hat brim. He twitched a little too, as if a tiny ripple of laughter had passed through each of the parts of his body in turn. Aye, lad, he said, some of my shipmates are here right enough. Some of my shipmates are here right enough. You kind of got to pay attention, because now that I know how the story ends, I know how this all ties together. But a soul can spend too long, too close to his shipmates. I would rather a little fresh company. Besides, I have a fine tale to tell, if you'll hear it, but is one that they know very well already. That they know very well already. A tale? Gladly, sir, I said, though not perhaps with much sincerity, for the weariness in my body infected my voice. Ha! You've heard many a yarn from all sorts and all ports, I'll be bound. You must think there's barely a tale of the briny that you've yet to hear. Well, I'll prove you wrong, lad. You have not heard the like of this one, I promise you, for this is a tale of the worst deeds of a dark-hearted scoundrel who betrayed his shipmates, a tale of greed and of ruthlessness and of terrible bloody revenge. I had heard similar claims before, of oft enough been disappointed just the same, but I remembered my uncle's words. A sailor likes the shadows to conceal his secrets. Here was a man almost made of shadows. Would he not have the darkest secrets to draw upon for his stories? I leaned in toward him, the better to hear his voice, and he grinned at my attention. There was a ship set sail some years back, an old tub, her glory days long behind her, but sturdy enough the weather another few squalls yet, sailing to the Barbados. It was a smooth enough voyage out. The captain and many of the crew knew the boat and the route well, and the weather and the seas were kind enough, so they arrived in good time and fine spirits. They offloaded their cargo and their work for the moment was done. So the crew, believing themselves entitled to some rowdy entertainment at the end of the voyage, set about the gaining of sore heads, one way or another, in various taverns around the town. When the ship was set off homeward 3 days later, several of the crew had not returned, having been variously waylaid by imprisonment, injury, and amorous entanglements, but the captain deemed that they still had sufficient hands to see them home safe, so they did not delay and set sail as planned. So they were off on a different land. Some of the crew never came back for different reasons. So the guy said, okay, we have enough. Let's get going and head home. Now, so here's the guy talking now. Now, 3 days out of on the return trip, and all's been well so far when something's spotted off the port bow. The captain puts his spyglass in his eyes and sees there is a jolly boat, like binoculars, seemingly adrift with no man aboard, but only a gigantic black bear in a cage. They sail along, expecting that perhaps there may be a sailor lying asleep as yet unseen, who might be able to explain this strange circumstance. But there is none, nor any other clue to aid their understanding. There is only a great black bear in a cage in a jolly boat adrift upon the waters. Now, this is a rum thing indeed. Oh, Captain's voice. Now this is a rum thing indeed, and sailors may be more prone than most to superstitions, as you know. So there is some debate amongst the crew as to what should be done. Some think it an ill omen and best left alone. Ill omen means like a bad sign. There's no they can't see anybody but this bear, so just hey, leave it alone. Contrarily, others think it will bring them good fortune, so they should bring the beast aboard. And yet others say that superstition can go hang, but surely such a beast could be sold for a good price once they are home. This last argument is the one that finds most favor with the captain. So block and tackle and strong arms of 4 sailors hoist the cage aboard with the bear in it, and the ship continues on her way home. So now they took the bear in the cage from the other ship with no passenger, no sailing anybody, just the bear, put it into their ship. Well, and now we've been here about 16 minutes, so now if you want to stop it, it gets better, and then come back later, like do some chores or go on your break or whatever. Well, the crew are wary of the beast at first, intrigued and fascinated, but also curious. It is a beautiful creature in the black as the devil's shadow, and sailors know enough of dark beauty to be wary of it. But despite its confinement in as small a space, this bear proves to be a placid creature, and as the days pass, he grows in the crew's affection. One night, when one sailor plays a squeeze box, the bear rises. Squeeze box, I think, is an accordion. The bear rises in its hind legs and dances a crew jig, and this is a great entertainment for all. Some of the crew, full of groggy courage, and even venture close enough to the cage to push a hand through the bars and stroke the blackest fur, and the bear makes no complaint. It is a happy night for all. Well, nearly all. While all else are laughing and carefree, the ship's cook, alone amongst them, has a face like a thunderhead. Thunderhead. So think of thunder in the sky. When does thunder come? Storms. Ugh. While ashore, he had spent his time gambling and enjoyed unusual luck. But this night, he finds his luck has stayed on land, their own ship. So if his luck stayed on land, how do you think he did that night? The cards are against him, and he loses all of his winnings and more to the ship's carpenter. Carpenter is one that can build things, make things. There's an angry fire in his belly, which he feeds with an excess of rum. More alcohol, the sign. Alcohol, bars, murder, everything's been somehow touched in a bar. He accuses the carpenter of cheating. There has been bad blood between these two before now, and old wounds sting afresh in the salty air, but the rest of the crew prevent a fight. They know these men of old, and they are not alike. The carpenter is a fine fellow, strong and brave and true, but the cook is a sorry soul. He's selfish and deceitful. Deceitful means not truthful. A weasel of a man, quite unlike his brother. And his brother? I said. The sailor looked up at me, and even with only his eyes discernible in the shadows of the face, I thought I read a teasing amusement in his expression. Did I not say? The cook and the carpenter are brothers. Those 2 men less alike you would seldom meet, but that's a little matter. Now, where was I? Yes. So the crew keep the men apart and prevent any violence between them, and they mock the cook as a poor loser. He swears and fumes and threatens in return, but the crew only laugh harder at his bluster, and eventually he slopes off to his bunk, muttering curses as he goes. Well, The drinking and the singing continue while his absence before the captain calls an end to it, takes the night watch himself, and sends his crew to get some sleep. The carpenter awakes in the bunk next morning and at once knows something is wrong. There are noises coming from above deck, different ones all at once, that his dozy head cannot quickly disentangle. He rises quickly and sees that others of the crew are doing likewise. There is a good deal of movement on the deck, panicked, heavy feet. And there are shouts and cries of fear, of pain, and of horror. The carpenter thinks for a moment that they have been boarded by pirates. He, he goes beneath his bed and takes up his knife, and there spies that is. He goes beneath his bed to take up his knife, and there spies that his locker, containing his winnings from the card game, is gone. He curses the cook, presuming, holy free holies, him be the culprit, with harsh words even for a sailor. Anger steals his heart, and he climbs the steps to the deck with terrible resolve and without fear. Whatever danger awaits him, he has fury on his side. So everybody went to bed. They hear all this noise up on top, on deck. So the carpenter, who beat the cook in his money, goes to see what's all the noise about, and finds that his locker, his lockbox, was taken. So he immediately thinks it's the brother. In the dark decks, the light hits the carpenter's eyes, and he is temporarily blinded by the glare of the low sun at the exact moment that he first hears the bear's fearsome roar. His fury turns instantly. He idly swings a massive paw at the carpenter, and the carpenter is swept aside like a cobweb, though he lands on the deck a deal more heavily. As he rises, he takes in the dreadful scene before him. The deck is awash with blood and strewn with bodies and parts of bodies, dead and dying shipmates, their cries and moans joining in a low murmur of pain. There is the bear's cage opened. Excuse me. There is the captain slumped dead by the wheel. There is the space where the jolly boat ought to be. There is the bear raging and roaring as he shrugs off a pistol shot from the brave young cabin boy and repays it with a deadly blow to the head. And there, out across the waves beyond the bow rail, is the jolly boat with the cook, his brother, the cook, the bad guy, rowing it away from the ship. And the carpenter has no doubt that his locker full of coins and jewels is in it too. The carpenter bellows across the sea to the cook. "You will die by my hand for this," he shouts. "I swear to you, brother, you will die by my hand." And the brother leaves with this crazy bear that he no less let out of the cage, and left his brother there with the bear and took his money. Ooh, that's like a soap opera within itself. At that moment, the sailor raised up his left hand, clenched tight into a fist, as if he were grasping onto life itself, and brought it down, boom, hard onto the table with a crash. I quite leaped in my seat with surprise, and my companion appeared a little shocked himself. This is the boy telling how this guy is telling the story in the bar. His right hand, by some instinct, appeared from beneath the table and fell upon the left, covering it like this. Boom! And then he covered his hand like this, as if trying to conceal its embarrassing violence. Then, in an instant, both hands disappeared back beneath the table, and the sailor regained his composure. I only glimpsed his hands, so distracted had I been by the thump on the tabletop, and so fleeting was their appearance. But I felt sure that there had been something awry in the way it looked. It seemed that they had been mismatched as his eyes, but I had little time to dwell upon it. So the kid's saying, "Hey, I noticed something, and they didn't really seem like the same type of hand, same body part." Then the bear hits the carpenter again, said the sailor, and the blow would have killed him had the ship not then rolled on a big swell, a big wave, like how the ocean kind of has these undulating waves. Had the ship not then rolled on a big swell and knocked the bear off balance. So it's just a glancing blow he receives, and he lands on the deck again with only a broken arm for his troubles, and his heart still beating. He ignores the pain and rolls clear of the bear's next lumbering attack, then jumps to his feet and scrambles up to the rigging of the mainmast. So the what are those called? The sail of the boat that catches the wind. So he's climbing up there with one arm because the other one's broken. So again, he ignores the pain and rolls clear of the bear's next lumbering attack, then jumps to his feet and scrambles up the rigging of the mainmast, hoping that the beast cannot follow. In any case, he does not, and the carpenter climbs on up, none too quickly, with only one good arm. To a fair height, the better to take stock of the situation. So the higher he climbs, he can kind of look around and see what the situation is, like the bear, who's left, his brother's gone. It's a sorry sight. He can see all the crew now. They are not all dead, but none are standing, and some have been torn to pieces. The bear is roaming the deck on all fours, roaring wildly. It is a monster now, a raging beast, unrecognizable as the playful pet of the previous evening. The carpenter cannot imagine what can have caused this terrible transformation, but he has no doubt that is somehow the cook's doing. He cast his eyes out to sea again. The jolly boat is a good distance away now and disappears and reappears as it rides along the rolling surface of the waters. So it's kind of like dipping it as so he can only see as it dips up, then he can see it dips down. The carpenter's good left hand grips the rigging tight as if it were gripping the cook's neck. Ah, and he needs to hold tight. He's been up the rigging in far rougher seas than this in the past, and without a care, but with only one good arm, and with no one out, and with no one at the helm to keep the ship steady. It's a fine job, and he has to do. It's a fine job he has to do to hold on as the ship pitches and rolls, and the mast sways wildly. He's wondering what to do next when fate takes a hand in his proceedings. The bear has run over to the bow rail and raised his front paws up into it, as if he's looking out at the departing wretch, the cook, out in the jolly boat. At that moment, a wave strikes the opposite bow and rocks the vessel suddenly over, far enough that the raging bear is sent off balance once again. Then, as a loose barrel rolls fast across the sloping deck and hits him a heavy blow, the bear is tipped clean over the rail with a comical yelp. The carpenter hears the splash as the beast hits the water, and then a deal more splashing and yelping, roaring as he surfaces. The next he sees of him, the bear is swimming, already at some distance. He dips and bobs with the waves, which are carrying him away from the ship, and the carpenter watches him a while, as though he fears the beast may somehow climb back aboard to continue his mayhem. Then he carefully sets about descending to the deck. He is only 3 steps down toward his goal when there is a dreadful grinding, crunching noise, and the ship throws herself sideways as if she wants to shake the carpenter off. For a moment, he is hanging from the rigging. That's all the stuff that keeps the sail up, the rigging or the lines and things. He's hanging from the rigging by one good hand, his legs dangling over the waves, and this if and as if this weren't peril enough for the blameless man to suffer, now he spies for the first time that the telltale dark fins of prowling sharks has to deal with the bear. And now as he's hanging on and the boat's kind of like, whoa, whoa, he's up here kind of towards the top. And as the boat itself sways, the boat might be going a little bit, but he's up here, so he's going further, and now he can see in the ocean that there's sharks down there. This would be another good time to take a break if you want to chunk this up. I probably have about 6 more pages, so hopefully about another 15 minutes if you want to take a break. I confess I had a sudden urge to giggle at this point. This is the boy talking now. And my attempts to mask my amusement with a cough were poorly acted. The sailor stopped his tale, and those unnatural eyes fixed me from the dark. Do you find my tale amusing, boy? He did not blink. I wondered then if he ever did, as I could not recall his having done so the whole time he had been talking. No, sir, I said. I was merely startled by the misfortune of this fellow. To encounter a mad bear at sea is most unfortunate in itself. And now sharks? He is surely the most unlucky. Don't, said don't, said the sailor in the quietest, firmest voice. Make light of his woes. His burning stare convinced me I had been smiling. Despite my wish to conceal my amusement, I was no longer. After a moment, he went on. With no hand at the wheel to steer her, wind and wave had pushed the ship onto a reef, holding her beneath the water. So now here is further misery to amuse you, young sir, for the ship is sinking and listing to one side as she goes down. The mast to which this poor devil, the carpenter, is clinging is leaning over even more severely. He sees the waters lap onto the deck, gradually sweeping them clean of his dead and dying shipmates. Sees those bodies, alive and dead, pulled below amidst the thrashing fins and tails of the shark. He clings onto the rigging in terror as the waters turn crimson and the mast bows down in supplication to those circling demons of the sea. He grips his knife and readies himself as he dips into the churning waters. So here he's hanging on with one hand, or somehow, and now he's got to take out his knife because, hey, if those sharks are going to attack me, it's not going to be easy. He'll not go out gently, but it is a contest soon ended. The jolly boat is a speck in the distance by now, but the carpenter's eyes are fixed firmly upon it, and even as he is dragged below, his mind and heart are full of dark fury at the cook's foul treachery. The cook on the boat, rowing away. Then there is darkness. The sharks eat their fill, and with minutes, all that remains of the entire crew are scraps of men at the bottom of the sea. But, sir, said I, you cannot expect me to think this tale true, for by your own account, every soul left aboard that ship perished. Only the treacherous cook had escaped, and he too early to witness much of what you have related. And besides, you said this was a tale of revenge. Revenge means like when you pay back, karma kind of thing. And yet no one remains to take that revenge. At this, I caught sight again of a dim scar of a smile within the shadows of the sailor's face. You've a keen mind, right enough, lad, he said. You reason that just beautiful, but there's things as happen at sea that defy reason. He paused for a moment as if distracted. His eyes flickered just a fraction up to one side as if he were looking at something behind me, and his smile widened. I turned to see what possible sight might have amused so dark a soul, and saw on the contrary only a sight to dismay me. My uncle emerging from behind the bar and striding angrily towards me. Remember at the beginning, he's not supposed to be sitting down, and his uncle had been in the kitchen this whole time. Now his uncle comes out. There's things as defy all explanation, said the sailor. There's rage that can outlive the mere shell of the body that it inhabits. He began to rise from his seat, and as he did so, he raised a hand to that battered leather hat and pulled it forward from his head so that for a moment it obscured his face entirely. So instead of taking a hat off this way, he took it off this way, so kind of blocking his face temporarily. But I saw then that across the wrist was a most dreadful scar. And if there has not yet been revenge, he said, as his hand dropped to his side and the hat to the floor, then this tale is not yet ended. There's the revenge again. Excuse me. He stepped out from the shadow and shrugged off the strange patchwork coat. And through the light was still dim, the full horror of his appearance was yet clear enough. He was a big man, but crooked and misshapen. His hulking frame somehow pulled askew, but there was no mistaking the power of him, nor his menace. The shirt he wore was ragged, one sleeve in tatters, the other missing entirely, so he revealed that the scar across his wrist was but one of very many scars. These scars crossed and recrossed his arms, dividing up his skin such that it resembled a farmer's field divided by hedges. So he's describing like all the different scars on his body, each area varying in color and texture, some of them marked by the tattooist's needle, and running along each scar was the same neat stitching as I had noted on his coat. Another such scar arced down from his forehead, then ran down beneath his eye and out across the cheek, the skin on either side of the stitching being a different shades. The greater part of that horrible visage, so vision, I just not sure how to pronounce it, was tanned and weather beaten, but the smaller part, confined by the scar, was fairer and smoother, the face of a boy. The unholy, mismatched eyes glared with hateful intent at the mouth, all graveyard teeth and torn lips. I heard my uncle emit an odd small sound behind me, part gasp and part whisper. You, he whispered. I, said the sailor. His right hand drew a knife from his belt and he lurched forward a step. I pushed back my chair and turned my head again. My uncle was backing away in a slow, horrific trance, unable to find the will to run, transfixed by fear. Do you think you could hide? Said the sailor. He was beside me now, and he placed his free hand upon my shoulder, a gentle weight to persuade me to sit down. Did you think we would not find you? We? Oh, God in heaven! My uncle's eyes darted over the sailor's body. Aye, said the sailor. The bear and the sharks between them made ugly work of us, but there were scraps enough left by the end still to build from. We have searched for you for so long, driven by burning rage, and now your captain's eye has found you out, and you will die by your brother's hand. Then the sailor stepped away from me toward my uncle, and as he did so, he left his hand just for an instant, brushed through my hair with a gentle affection that I recognized at once. Then it took the knife from the right hand and set it to its bloody task. That was his dad. pieced together somehow. All right, now the little summary. So just a couple more minutes. Mr. Fowler's story having come to an end, Jack feels disoriented and adrift. The blood-filled narrative had gripped him completely, and for as long as Mr. Fowler had been relating to it, there had been no one and nothing else in the room. There had only been Mr. Fowler's face floating in the darkness, the rich music of his voice, and the terrible images drawn by his words. Now that it has ended, Jack feels abandoned. His stomach jolts inside him as if he is suddenly falling. It is a terrifying sensation that he tries hard to conceal. He gasps in a desperate breath and holds it, and the panic and the fear subside a little. His racing heart slows. He keeps his unblinking eyes set on Mr. Fowler and he smiles. Mr. Fowler smiles back. I hope that passed muster, says Mr. Fowler. Oh, it did, Mr. Fowler, says Frances, and her voice full of admiration, and even silent Mr. Randall gives a subtle nod of approval. Jack nods too, though it was more than just the story itself that had scared him. It was Mr. Fowler himself. Jack looked at him now. Rivers of shadow run along the cavernous lines on his face, widening and narrowing at the candlelight flickers, drawing and redrawing his features as if he is one man with myriad faces. All of those faces smiling though, and it is a kindly smile, almost enough to reassure. Thank you, Mr. Fowler, if you please, says Mr. Osterley. With his eyes still on Jack, Mr. Fowler leans forward, and as he does so, the light hits his face at such an angle that, just for a second, his kindly smile is transformed into a sinister leer, like stare. Then he blows out the flame, pushes back his chair, and all but disappears into the darkness. It was only a trick of the light, Jack knows, but that snapshot moment was another crumb to feed that worm of doubt in his head, to make him reconsider what is possible and what impossible in the world. And he thinks again about the marks on Frances Crane's wrist, and the worm stirs and turns and grows. Just 4 flames left now at the table is like a boat of light in the sea of darkness. The room has almost ceased to exist, and those who have already told their stories are just dim shapes in the gloom. Miss Crane, says Mr. Osterley, if you'd be so kind. Frances smiles at him, all traces of her recent distress now utterly vanished. Of course, she says, then addresses everyone else in the light of darkness. I think you'll like my story tonight. Most of you, anyway. Some of you already know I was a painter before. I used to have a lot of friends who were artists of one kind or of another. Painters and sculptors and dancers and singers and musicians and writers and poets. This story is one that one of the writers once told me, not one he wrote, just one he'd heard somewhere. He was a good writer for a while at least, but he was always worried that he might run out of ideas. Said he hated that question that writers always get asked. Where did you get your ideas from? Because he didn't know the answer, and that scared him. Anyway, because of that, I think he was always very taken by this story. He told it to me a few times, actually. I think he told it a lot and forgot he had already heard it. And I could never bring myself to tell him, but at least that means I can remember it well. All right, that's it. We only have a little bit left. I'm going to try to maybe read the rest of them today. So hopefully by Thursday, you'll be able to take an AR test on this book. 8 points. I mean, it's been a while, but all you need is 70 to pass. All right, you guys, have a good day and get your work done. New week, week 2. All right, bye.